Give
This
me a second.
conference will now be recorded.
वापस
This
आपको चालू करना
conference will
पड़ेगा।
now be recorded.
Yes, Mayur, go ahead.
Good evening, participants. I, CA Mayur Jain, welcome you all on behalf of Kalyan Dubil branch. Today is the sixth session on the international tax series. The topic is taxation of dividends and interest for non-residents, and the speaker is our own CA Vyomesh Pathak. I welcome Vyomesh Pathak sir on behalf of participants. I am happy to announce to the participant that Vyomesh Bhai has been invited to speak on Viva Se Vishwas topic also by the WIC on 4th of May. The details are there on the CPE portals. So I request you all to also avail the opportunity to listen to the topic also on 4th of May. Now I hand over the charge to our chairman, C. Ankit Agarwal.
Thank you, Mayur. Good evening, all the members. I welcome you on behalf of Kalyan Dobli branch. As we know today, there is a sixth session of the International Tax Series, which is headed by CA Vyomesh Pathak. Friends, he is also seeing the designing of direct tax series and selecting the speakers. We are very thankful to our own speaker, CA Vyomesh Pathak, and hearty congratulations for being the speaker in WIRC. It is a very proud moment for the members of the branch when a member from our branch goes across the region to WIRC and delivers a seminar in WIRC. Thank you, Vyomesh Bhai, and congratulations to you once again. With this, I request you to please start the session for today.
Okay. Thank you, Ankit, and thank you, Mayur. I think I'll mute everybody now once again, so that we can have a seamless discussion. I have kept my video off just to ensure that the session goes smooth in terms of, and there is no network connectivity. So therefore, I have kept my video off. I hope I am audible to all. Just a quick yes or no in the chat box. Am I audible? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so once again, I welcome you all to the sixth session on interest and dividend taxability of the non-resident series, that is international taxation series. Now, I think most of you might be aware that we have been doing this since quite a bit now, that we have been meeting every Wednesday and Saturday discussing different topics on the international tax. We started with the basics, that is residential status. Then we moved on to the basics of treaties. Then we started to the respective articles, starting with royalty FTAs, then capital gains. Then we went on to last week we had a discussion on permanent establishment. Now coming to today's topic of interest and dividend. Plus, now I think with this we will be concluding on almost all the revenue streams in terms of the taxability, etc. So on Saturday we will be moving on to the foreign tax credit. I think most of you might have seen me again and again for all the six sessions, and some of you might have been bored again looking at me or listening to me. So we have one more speaker joining me on Saturday. Again, she is from Big Four, and she has worked in the field of international tax for quite some time. Neha Agrawal will be joining me on Saturday to discuss FTC, that is foreign tax credit, again, which is very important in terms of any income which is earned from outside India. How do I claim credit in terms of the taxes paid in the overseas jurisdiction? So that is an important session on Saturday. Coming back to today's topic, dividend and interest for non-residents. While I was designing this particular session, I think again it was in lockdown only. But what I was thinking is, I was in two minds whether I should have this topic as a separate topic or should I merge it with some other topic. I could have merged it with capital gains, but considering the recent changes, considering the recent developments by way of the budget 2020, it becomes more relevant to have a focused discussion more on dividend, because you all might be aware that as far as dividend is concerned, there is an amendment wherein we are going back to the traditional approach of taxability of dividend. That is, we are going back to the taxability of dividend in the hands of the shareholders. Till now, we had dividend distribution tax in the hands of the company, and thereby dividend was exempt in the hands of the shareholders. But now with this amendment, things become very, very interesting in terms of taxability, and also more so in terms of taxability in the hands of the non-residents, and therefore the Article 11 of the treaty, rather Article 10 of the treaty for taxability of dividend becomes more relevant. Now, just to give you a background on the amendment which is being there in the Finance Act 2020. Now, let me tell you, this amendment for bringing the taxability in the hands of the shareholders and leaving no DDT, that is dividend distribution tax, in the hands of the corporates or the companies is at the request of the non-resident investors only. The foreign investors have been time and again saying that we want the dividend to be taxed in our hands, and we don't want it to be taxed in the hands of the company, for two reasons. One, the company paying dividend distribution tax at the rate of 20% approximately, for which the shareholders are not getting any credit in their home country. That is their first hit, and thereby they are getting lesser amount in terms of dividend. They are getting lesser amounts in terms of the return on investment, that is ROI, because suppose 100 rupees is the profit after tax, right? And you have to pay dividend distribution tax. Simplistically, for example, assume the tax rate of dividend distribution tax is 20. Let's not go into the details of the education cess and surcharge. The amount left to be distributed is only 80, right? So therefore, what the overseas shareholders used to get is only 80, their respective share of 80, of course. Now, again, they did not get any credit for the dividend distribution tax. So effectively, that became a cost to them because of lower dividend payout in terms of the dividend distribution tax. So therefore, they have been time and again requesting the government since few years that we don't want this DDT to continue. We want the traditional taxability of dividend. We are happy to pay tax on dividend in India, and we will claim credit in our respective home country. That was the situation, or that was the backdrop of bringing this amendment by this Finance Act 2020. So by virtue of this amendment, now again, as a result, what happens is this dividends will be taxable in the hands of the shareholders, be it resident shareholders or non-resident shareholders. So in this presentation, or in this session today, what I have tried to cover is what will be the impact on the shareholders, including we the resident shareholders, and as well as covering the non-resident shareholders. So I have tried to cover both the aspects of the shareholding, be it a domestic shareholder or a non-resident or a foreign shareholder, how it will impact my income or taxability. I have tried to cover the entire gamut of dividend taxation in this session by way of a table and comparative charts. Plus, I have also tried to do a comparative analysis of a structure. Now, you might have seen in either media, be it WhatsApp University or print media or news channels, that now due to this amendment, whether LLP structure becomes more relevant or the company structure is still relevant. So therefore, I have also tried to capture that aspect in my presentation today as a comparative analysis of company versus LLP, as in which structure is more beneficial, both again from the perspective of a resident as well as non-resident shareholders. Again, my focus, of course, will be on non-residents because the session is designed for international taxation. But I have tried to cover the domestic taxation also. If you have any queries, I'll be happy to have it in the chat box, and maybe we will have a Q&A session at the mid. So once we end dividend, we may have questions on dividend, and then probably we can start on interest, time permitting, and have the questions on interest towards the end. I hope that makes sense. Or maybe you want to have questions towards the end. What do you suggest? Do we have questions on dividend in between, or do we have questions towards the end? Suggestions in the chat box, please. Quickly. Towards the end. Okay, so we end the we have the Q&A towards the end. So we'll continue dividend and interest, and we have the Q&A towards the end. So let us not disturb the flow. Majority of you say towards the end, so I'll go with the majority. Okay, so coming back to today's the first half of the session, that is on dividend. As I said, DDT has been abolished with effect from 1st April 2020. Now the dividend is taxable in the hands of the shareholders. Tax implications on Indian company declaring dividends as well as on shareholders, resident as well as non-resident, is discussed in my subsequent slides. Now, what happens to dividend declared in March 2020, but the dividend is paid by the company, because DDT is payable either on declaration or on payment, whichever is earlier. I hope you are aware of this. So therefore, if DDT is payable, if DDT is already paid, for example, if before 31st of March, because the dividend has been declared. So if you are aware, DDT is to be paid within 14 days of declaration or payment, whichever is earlier, right? So assuming the dividend is declared somewhere in the month of March, but the actual payout of dividend happens in April, right? That is after 1st April 2020 in the new financial year. So here what will happen is, if we continue with the amendment as it is, then there may be a possibility of double taxation. The reason being, the company might have paid dividend distribution tax, because till 31st of March DDT was applicable. So since my dividend is declared before 31st of March, DDT is applicable. And subsequently, after 31st of March, the dividend becomes taxable in the hands of the shareholders. So to avoid this double taxation, the government has brought in a clarification that DDT, once the company has paid DDT, there will not be again levy of tax on dividend in the hands of the shareholders. So there will not be a double whammy, or there will not be a double taxation in terms of the dividend is concerned. So either the company pays DDT if the dividend is declared on or before 31st of March, then the shareholders will not be charged to tax in terms of the dividend received by them. So therefore, it is a fair proposition, and this will not be leading to double taxation. Now, again, coming to the elimination of cascading effects, wherein you have multiple structures, holding company structure as the case may be. So to have that multiple structure or a holding structure covered, what proposition the government has brought in is basically they have introduced deduction under section 80M. They have introduced deduction under section 80M of the amount of dividend received as a deduction in the company, which in turn declares the dividend before the due date of filing of return. So for example, there is a holding company, right, which has received dividend, from its subsidiary company, and the amount of dividend received is say 1 lakh rupees simplistically. Then what will happen is, when the company, assuming the company is declaring the dividend on or before the due date of filing of return of income, then it is eligible to claim the dividend received by it as a deduction by virtue of section 80M. Now here what is important is, dividend has to be declared by the holding company before the due date. If it declares the dividend after the due date of filing of return, it will lose the deduction of section 80M. Therefore, the timing of payout of dividend is becoming important if you are structuring your payout of dividend. So it is very, very important for you to plan the payout accordingly. So that is one aspect in terms of resident shareholders to be considered. As I said, I'll be considering resident as well as non-resident both. So first, let me cover resident first, and then we move on to the non-residents. Then, secondly, Section 57 of the Income Tax Act gives you the deduction for the interest expense, which will be restricted up to 20% of dividend income, and no deduction at all for other expenses incurred. So therefore, one important aspect here for resident shareholders is, if you have borrowed money for investing in these shares, you are eligible to get deduction of interest under Section 57 at the rate of, or maximum to the limit of 20% and not beyond that, irrespective of your actual expenditure going beyond 20%, right? 20% of dividend income is the cap on claiming the interest expense, that too under Section 57. Now take a case of a shareholder who is in the business of investing in shares, right? Assuming investing in shares or trading in shares is my own business, therefore I am receiving dividend which I'll be offering to tax as income from business and not income from other sources. This restriction of 20% is applicable if I am offering the business, or if rather I am offering the dividend income as income from other sources. However, if I am offering it to tax as business income because I am a trader in shares, the question arises whether I can claim the interest expense under Section 36(1)(3). That is one question that time will answer to my mind. If you ask me, practically, if you can prove that this is your business and you are into the business of investing, and therefore you are also offering the dividend income as income from business, arguably, possibly, you may claim interest expense beyond 20% under Section 36(1)(3). However, the litigation by the tax authorities may not be avoided. Earlier, the litigations were under Section 14A in terms of the dividend income, because any expense in relation to exempt income was disallowed under Section 14A read with Rule 8D. Now, the new litigation will start, that is allowability of interest under Section 36(1)(3). So again, the same lot of questions, that is whether this was from own funds or borrowed funds, whether these borrowed funds were actually used for the investment in shares. Lastly, but very importantly, whether it can be concluded that the shareholder is in the business of trading in shares or investing in shares, and therefore this is to be considered as business income. The dividend income is to be considered as business income, and ultimately the deduction under Section 36(1)(3) is to be allowed. So this will result, or this will open a new Pandora's box altogether. If you ask me personally, 36(1)(3) arguably should be available. Again, it will depend on facts of each case, and I cannot have a simple answer that yes, 36(1)(3) will be available to all the assessees if they are claiming it as business income. I am not suggesting everybody to claim it as business income. It will be based on the facts and circumstances of the situation, and it cannot be applied across board. So therefore, the interplay between 80M, 57 and 80AB, that is, which is capping the deduction of Chapter 6A deductions, becomes very, very important for the shareholders who are offering it to tax as income from business or profession. Now, moving on, as I said, resident shareholders, I have tried to capture it in one slide. In terms of the tax rates, etc. So now if you see this particular slide, assuming the company is in old regime, that is the DDT, and in new regime it will not pay any tax. Similarly, the shareholder assuming is an LLP. So what I have tried to do is I have tried to capture it in the basket wise. So assuming if my shareholder is trust, individual, AOP, BOI, what will be the impact? assuming the shareholder is an LLP, what will be the impact? Old regime versus new regime. So coming to the first basket, that is trust individual AOP BOI. Tax on company declaring dividend, which is assuming 20%, that is my DDT. New regime, it will not pay anything. Dividend not exceeding 1 million. Dividend not exceeding 1 million. Now, as you are aware, 115 BPD. Sorry. Taxes dividend in the hands of the shareholders, if they are receiving it more than 1 million, that is more than 10 lakhs, it is taxed at the rate of 10% to 14%, depending upon the rate of surcharge applicable to them. So the effective tax rate becomes to 20.56 if my shareholding or if my dividend is less than 1 million, that is less than 10 lakhs. Or it can go maximum up to 34.81. It can go maximum up to 34.81%. Now, coming to the new regime, assuming I am a non-resident shareholder also, and suppose I am falling in the slab rate of 10% or 5%, 10% to be simplistic. So therefore, my tax rate will be 10.4%, that is 10% plus education cess of 4%. So it works out to 10.4%, or maximum it will be 35.88. Now, how do I arrive at 35.88? If you are aware, 30% is the MMR, that is maximum marginal rate for taxability as far as individual trust or AOP BOI is concerned. The cap on surcharge, which was originally proposed as 37%, now it has been capped at 15%. So 30% plus 15% of the surcharge, that is the highest surcharge, and 4% education cess. If you calculate, it works out to 35.88%. Right? So therefore, that is one aspect. Assuming my shareholder is an LLP. Again, old same thing. If my dividend exceeding 1 million, I will continue to pay 10.4% to 14.25%, which was there under section 1 by BBT. Then I compare that with the new regime. So again, as compared to the old regime, LLP will be subject to tax at the rate of 30% plus surcharge plus cess, that is 12% surcharge and 4% cess. So effectively the tax rate comes to 34.94%. So this is how I have tried to compare the shareholders in different baskets. Coming to the buyback, now initially when the company used to buy back, the tax rate was 20% plus surcharge, 10% surcharge, and then 4% cess. So effective tax rate on buyback used to be 23.3%. So now it will be important to evaluate whether you should go for 23.3% buyback tax, or you go for the taxation on dividend. So this again is an right. I'm clear on this slide. Can I move on to the next slide? So here, as I said, I have also tried to do a comparison of company versus LLP. So here is a comparison for you for company versus LLP. Rohit says not audible. Am I audible now? Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So this is a chart comparing a company versus LLP structure, which is more beneficial as a holding structure. So this will help you to compare, because there is also an amendment in terms of the taxability or the tax rates for companies. So therefore, I thought let me include this slide as well here before moving on to the treaties. So if you look at this particular slide, manufacturing company, right? Manufacturing company will have a tax rate, headline tax rate of 15% plus surcharge plus cess. So therefore effective tax rate comes to 17.16%. It comes to 17.16%. Company under a new regime, that is under 115 BAB, then the tax rate will be 25.17, that is 22% the tax rate plus surcharge and cess. So effective tax rate comes to 20. Coming to MAT, for manufacturing companies and for the new regime companies, the MAT has been abolished, so there is no MAT as such. The MAT is applicable only for those companies who are continuing in the old regime. Similarly, LLP, AMT, that is alternate minimum tax, will be chargeable at the rate of 21.55%. Moving on, tax on repatriation. Now, what happens when you distribute the dividend? What happens when you distribute the dividend? Right? So if you distribute the dividend, in case of company, the tax rate will be 20%. As far as the tax rate is concerned, it will be 20%. That is, when I'm talking about a non-resident shareholder, it will be 20%. However, under treaties, the rate can be as low as 5%. The rate can be as low as 5%, and again it may go up to 20% again. Now, if you compare this with LLP, now in the case of LLP, since it is a partnership firm, the profit distribution in the hands of the partners is exempt from tax, right? So therefore it is not taxable. Now, if you compare with different rates under the tax treaties, starting from 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%. So what I have tried to do here is I have taken all the available options, or rather all treaties. I have tried to cover all the treaties, different baskets of treaties where the tax rate can either be 5%, tax rate can either be 10%, it can be 15%, or it can be 20%. Domestic tax rate is 20% plus surcharge and cess. Now, we will discuss about each countries also, as in which country has 5%, which country has 10%. We will discuss this when we come to the treaties. But if you assume 5% effective tax rate on dividend, then the headline tax rate 17.16%, right? So assuming my profit is 100, on that the company pays 17.16%, and profit after tax will be what, 82.84 something. On that 82.84, if I calculate 5% and I add it to 17.16, you can do the maths on your own. I will be circulating the slide separately. The effective tax rate comes to 21.302 something. So therefore 21.30 for companies having tax rate of 17%, that is new manufacturing companies. Coming to the 22% companies, the effective tax rate will be 28.91%. It will be 28.91%. Under the old regime, it will be 21.6%, assuming where the company is paying MAT. If the company is not paying MAT, then obviously it will be more. Or then subsequently, if it is 10%, the effective tax rate comes to 25.44%, 32.66%, and 25.73% respectively. Coming to 15%, it comes to 29.59, 36.39, and 29.85. 20%, it comes to 33.73 manufacturing company, 40.14 for the new law, that is 22%, and old regime it comes to 33.98%, right? Assuming the company is paying MAT. Now compare this with LLP. If you compare this with LLP, the tax rate for LLP is 34.94%, or if it is falling under AMT, then 21.55. There will be very few cases of AMT, considering that as such no deductions etc. are available in today's era. So assuming a tax rate of 34.94% for LLPs, and if you compare that with 5%, even 20% for that matter, for manufacturing companies, it comes to 33.73%. So therefore, it is not that simple for us to move to LLP structure. You need to look at the tax cost in the hands of the shareholder. This chart is just a summary of that the entire calculation has to be done. You need to compare it with uh, the LLP versus company based on case to case basis, and only then you decide whether company is better or LLP is better. It will be, there are various loose talks going on around in the market that LLP is better, LLP is better, but no, company structure is still better for most of the cases. If you see, except the last line here, 20% again for 22% companies, and uh, so apart from these two, that is 36.39% and 40.14%, if you see, everywhere the company structure is more beneficial as compared to LLP. So it is not that easy to compare company versus LLP on a standalone basis. You need to look at the overall cost. At the same time, what is important is also the tax on exit, because assuming I want to sell no audio, just a second. Yeah, am I audible now? Okay, thank you, thank you. So what I was saying is, yes, so what I was saying is, it is not simple to compare company with LLP on a standalone basis. What is important is you need to look at the taxability in the hands of shareholder also, one, plus you also need to look at the tax on exit. That is, assuming if I have to transfer the shares, if I have to sell the shares, if I have to exit, at the same time, if I want to come out of the LLP, I don't want to continue my investment in the LLP, I want to sell the investments in LLP, that tax cost is also to be considered, because that will be very, very relevant for you. Because if you see the bottom of the table here, shares under domestic tax law, it is the transfer of shares is taxable at the rate of 10. Audible now? I think there was some problem with my audio. I hope now this is audible. Yes, thank you. So what I was saying is tax on exit is also important. So if you see the bottom of the table here, the tax on exit. Now, in terms of a non-resident, transfer of shares is taxable at the rate of 10.92%, that is assuming surcharge and cess also, as compared to the transfer of interest in LLP, long-term transfer of interest in LLP, it will be 21.84% under the domestic tax law. However, Under few treaties, it might be nil also. Under few treaties, it might in the last session, that is effectively the tax rate. Am I audible now? Yes. So effectively, we have seen that gains from alienation of shares is exempt in most of the treaties. In many treaties, it is nil. So therefore, there is no tax on transfer of shares except for Netherlands. Also, what is important in terms of CCDs, the CCDs is not taxable, because we have seen what is taxable is gain from alienation of shares. CCD is an another security which is not covered. So you need to consider also the taxability on exit before coming to a conclusion of company versus LLP. I hope I am clear on this. So therefore, this slide is a snapshot which will help you to take a decision whether a company is better or whether an LLP is better. Okay. So moving on, withholding tax, TDS. Now TDS is also applicable on all the dividends declared and paid on or after 1st April 2020. So I have tried to capture the TDS implications here on this slide. Resident shareholders, the TDS rate is 10% irrespective of the taxability. As far as non-resident Indians is concerned, NRIs, it is 20%. Non-resident, not being companies or foreign companies, it is 20%. FPIs, foreign portfolio investment, also it is 20%. Now, except for FPIs, withholding can be done under the tax treaties under section 195, that is the withholding tax section for non-residents, and section 237A, which can go, that is rates in force. You can apply the treaty rate, which can be as low as 5%, So therefore, it is important for us to understand where treaty benefit is available and thereby apply the treaty rate. So if I have to apply the treaty rate, the option that I see is I would suggest you need to obtain a nil withhold or lower withholding certificate from your tax officer in order to avoid any litigation or any addition under section 201 in terms of the short payment of TDS. So therefore, you should not blindly apply the treaty. The suggestion would be to go safe and obtain a lower withholding certificate from the tax authorities, because you being an Indian company, I would suggest you should not go for, or you should not invite litigation by suo moto adopting the treaty rate. While yes, you can do that, you can adopt the treaty rate, but then there is a risk of litigation, there is a risk of 201 notice being issued, and there is a risk of interest liability also. So, and also remember one thing, Indian company can be held as a representative assessee for the non-resident shareholders also, and the shortfall of tax can be recovered from you. The shortfall of tax can be recovered from you being an Indian company. Now, coming to the treaties, this was all about the domestic tax rate. I will conclude on the withholding tax once we'll go through the treaties and we discuss on the different tax rates available under the treaties. So before we begin with interest, I will conclude with the withholding options and the treaty rates so that you can have a picture on what are the effective tax rates in terms of the treaties for taxability of dividends. Now, coming to dividend, Article 10 under the tax treaties. This is a structure. There are 5 sub-clauses under the OECD model. Article 10 sub-article 1 says the taxability of dividend, it gives the right to the resident state. It gives right to the resident state at the rate of 10 or rather Article 10 sub-article 1 says the taxability of dividend in the resident country. 10.2 deals with taxability in the source country. 10.3 gives us the definition or meaning of the term dividend. 10.4 says Holding effectively connected with the PE. If there is a PE situation, then what happens on the dividend taxability? Last one, prohibition of extraterritorial taxation of dividends or undistributed profits. What I have tried to do is, I have, while going through the details of each and every sub article, I have tried to cover it by virtue of a case study or an example, so that you can understand the implications, in terms of taxability, in terms of taxability under the treaties also. So now, moving on to the next slide, Article 10 sub Article 1, which gives the resident state. Assuming in our case, we take an example of source state being India. Simplistically, source state is India. Resident state can be the shareholders resident, be it Netherlands, US, UK, Canada, as the case may be. So if we look at this, dividends paid by a company which is a resident of a contracting state, to a resident of other contracting state, may be taxed in that other state. Now I read it again, I break this up into different sub paras so that you can understand it once again. Dividends paid by a company which is resident of a contracting state, in our case it is, say, India. So dividend paid by a company which is resident of India to a resident of other contracting state, say for example US, may be taxed in that other state, means US. So therefore it gives the right, Article 10 sub Article 1 gives the right to tax in the hands of the resident state, and not the source state. Source state will come in sub Article 2. Okay, so now we come to the definition, or rather, now what is important here is, look at the wording, dividend paid. Now what do you mean by paid? This is important. Why this is important? Because if you look at section 8 of the Indian Income Tax Act, it says dividend declared, but the wording used in the treaty is paid. So OECD model commentary para 7 of Article 10 says that the term paid has a very wide meaning, since the concept of payment means the fulfillment of obligation to put the funds at the disposal of the shareholders in the manner required by a contract or custom. So effectively it says obligation to put the funds at disposal. The funds should be at disposal to the shareholder, is what OECD commentary says. Now, as far as treaty is concerned, it does not define the term paid, so therefore you come back to the domestic tax laws. As far as India is concerned, being the source country, we come to the definition of paid, which is given in section 43 subsection 2. Now 43 subsection 2 reads as, paid means actually paid or incurred according to the method of accounting. So effectively, if you look at section 43 subsection 2, it covers incurred also. Now what do you mean by incurred? Incurred means right to receive, accrual. If I am following accrual, and if that amount is at the disposal of the shareholders, it will be considered as incurred. However, if you look at section 8, which is a computation mechanism or timing for capital or calculation of dividend income or taxability, till that section 8 was redundant, because we never tax dividend in the hands of the shareholders because of 1150, that is DDT. However, now section 8 becomes relevant in terms of the timing of payment of dividend tax. So therefore, if you look at section 8 says, for the purpose of inclusion in the total income of an assessee, any dividend declared, what is important here is declared, by a company or distributed or paid. So it includes declared, distributed or paid by it within the meaning of subclause A or subclause B or subclause C D or E. So if you know, the definition of dividend is given in section 222, plus there are various other clauses of 222 which also includes deemed dividend. So 222A to 222E, if you look at the Income Tax Act, it gives you the definition of the term dividend, wherein 222E is deemed dividend. Any interim dividend, that is B, it says interim dividend is covered in B. Before going to B, the conclusion on A is that when this shall be deemed to be the income, it shall be deemed to be the income in the previous year in which it is so declared, distributed or paid as the case may be. So कौन से साल में टैक्स होगा? Either in the year of declaration or distribution or paid, whichever is earlier. That is what section 8 says. Now subclause B, it says any interim dividend shall be deemed to be income of the previous year in which the amount of such dividend is unconditionally made available by the company to the member who is entitled to it. So this is for interim dividend. Now the interesting part is we come to the non-resident taxation of dividend, which is covered in section 9. So section 9 subsection 1 clause 4 says the following income shall be deemed to accrue or arise in India. Dividend paid. Now if you see the wording used here is paid, right? If you look at earlier slide, section 8 says declared, distributed or paid. However, 914 uses the word paid. So there is a difference between the wording in the section also. So here we need to go by only paid. And not distribution or not declaration also. So if you look at the meaning of the term paid, it has been given by various high courts and various courts also. So credit entry in the books of the payer to account of the payee amounts to its receipt by the payee. This is where accrual method is followed. Once I have credited the account of the payee, it means I have the obligation to pay the payee. Therefore, Supreme Court in the case of Standard Triumph says that this will be, or the payment also includes credit entry in the hands of the payee. However, if you look at the Bombay High Court decision in the case of Pfizer Corporation 259 ITR 391, it says dividend paid by an Indian company outside India constitutes income deemed to accrue in India under section 914, because dividend will always be paid in the foreign bank account in terms of non-resident shareholders. So therefore it is paid outside India. However, since it has accrued in India, it will be taxable in India. If it is taxable in India, you have to look at section 914, and the wordings used in 914 is paid. Now this decision covers a period prior to FEMA, where FERA regime was there, and when you have to declare or pay the dividend outside India, you need to get RBI approval. Approval for making the payment of that dividend. So if you don't get the approval of RBI, you cannot make the payment of dividend irrespective of you declaring the dividend. So based on these facts, the Bombay High Court judgment of Pfizer says you have to tax the dividend only in the year of payment. And when you receive the RBI approval. Now in today's scenario, RBI approval is not there. But you can still go to 914 and use the wording said paid. Now this analogy is also important. This is also important for taxability of royalty and FTS. I'm not sure whether I discussed this during the session on royalty and FTS, but the wordings used in the treaty, Article 12 for taxability of royalty and FTS, also use the word paid. So there are various judgments. Wherein the courts have held that this will be taxed only on payment, including Bombay High Court in the case of Siemens. The Bombay High Court has said that royalty FTS will be taxed on payment basis and not on accrual basis, because the wording used in the treaty is paid. So similarly, we can draw analogy from those judgments and apply that here also. Even under the act, the wording used is 914 says paid, right? So also the treaty says paid. So therefore, an argument can be dividend is taxable only on payment basis and not on the basis of declaration. So this is an important aspect to be considered for taxability of dividend in the hands of a non-resident. Now look at this case study. Company R has equity investment in company S. R is a country of residence, S is a country of state. Whether dividend declared by R, whether dividend declared by S, rather dividend declared by S to R, whether it will be taxable, whether it will be taxable in the hands of R. The answer is yes, it will be taxable in the hands of R, but assuming this dividend is declared in the year 2021, this dividend is declared in the financial year 2021. However, the payment is done in financial year 21-22. The payment is made in the financial year 21-22. So in which year, whether this dividend, in first question is whether this dividend is taxable, the answer is yes, since it has been paid by the resident of India, it has deemed to accrue or arise in India. Now the only question is in which year this dividend is to be taxed, financial year 2021 or financial year 21-22. Yes, answers in the chat box please. 21-22, perfect. Year of receipt, because this is what we have been discussing since long. It will be taxable in the year of receipt. Good. So we move on. Move to the article 10 sub article 2, taxability in the source country. So we saw 914 taking the same thing forward. 914, now we read into the treaty how the treaty is worded. 10 subsection article 10 sub article 2 deals with taxability in the source country. Okay, paragraph 2 of article 10 lays down that dividend may also be taxed in the contracting state of which the company paying the dividend is a resident, that is company R. Company paying the dividend, now in this case if you look at the earlier case, company paying the dividend was S, right? Company paying the dividend was S. So therefore, this will be taxed in country source, in the country S, is what we just discussed. Okay. So accordingly, the laws of that state, assuming India in this case, will be applicable. But if the beneficial of the owner of the dividend is a resident of other contracting state, that is country S, that tax shall not exceed X percentage of the gross dividend. So assuming 5% or 10% of the gross dividend, you have to look at respective treaties. This X percent can be 10%, it can be 5%, it can be 15%, it can be 20% also. So we look at different treaties in the subsequent slides, what rate is provided in each treaty. If, this is important, if the beneficial owner is a company, if the beneficial owner is a company which holds directly at least 10%, directly at least 10% or Y%, whatever, of the capital of the company paying the dividend. That is, if I am a company shareholder, I should hold at least X% of the capital of the company paying the dividend. So here the bold words are very, very important. The very first bold word is beneficial owner. So the concept of beneficial owner is important, which holds directly at least Y% of the capital of the company paying dividends, of the company paying dividends. In other cases, that is where the shareholder is not a company, I fall in clause B, that is X% of the gross amount of the dividend in all other cases. So therefore, as I said, with the amendment to section 115O, article 10(2) becomes very much relevant, because now the taxability is in the hands of the shareholders. So as far as non-resident is concerned, the taxability will be as per the treaty, if the treaty is beneficial to the non-resident shareholder. So Article 10, sub-article 2, look at the word beneficial owner. Now, this is very, very important even for taking the treaty benefit. Even for claiming the treaty benefit, because now under MLI also the concept of beneficial owner is very, very important. So the very first concept is the shareholder should be the beneficial owner. What do you mean by beneficial owner? It is not defined either in model convention or in any of the tax treaties also. So therefore you need to understand it in the light of the object and purpose of the tax treaty, right? So for example, if I am talking about a shareholder who is, say, based out of, say, Mauritius or Singapore, then the Mauritius shareholder or the Singapore shareholder should be holding the shares in its own capacity and not as a pass-through or agent of somebody else. So it should not be a conduit company just to claim the treaty benefit. I set up a company in Mauritius or Singapore to claim the treaty benefits. That is not possible. You need to be the ultimate beneficial owner, right? So therefore you cannot be a pass-through entity or a conduit entity to be an agent or nominee of your principal shareholder. So this concept has also been upheld by NetWest in various by the AAR, and also in the case of AIG, that if you are a conduit company, you cannot claim the treaty benefit. You cannot claim the treaty benefit. Now, how do I decide whether I am a beneficial owner? To decide that, Severity Circular 789 of 2000 is relevant, which says, in terms of Mauritius, it was specific circular, which says that certificate of residence, that is TRC, issued by Mauritian authorities is sufficient evidence for accepting the status of residence as well as beneficial owner for applying India-Mauritius Treaty. So this circular, along with the who is speaking? Yeah. So this is what I was discussing. You should be a beneficial owner. You should be a beneficial owner as a shareholder. And Circular 789 says that in order to claim the beneficial owner, the TRC is enough. This is again in the pre-MLI regime. If you have a TRC, you can conclude sorry, that the shareholder is the beneficial owner. However, one word of caution here, in the post MLI situation where MLI is applicable to you, you need to check what is the wording of the MLI also, because if the MLI is applicable, then you need to check the beneficial ownership criteria under the MLI also, as we discussed earlier, and we will also discuss in detail about the beneficial ownership criteria under MLI in our subsequent session when we discuss MLIs. I think that is on 9th of May, where my colleague Santosh will be supporting me to discuss the key aspects of MLIs. But as I said, the concept of beneficial owner is important. The concept of beneficial owner is important in terms of taxability. Okay. Moving on. Meaning of the word capital. We saw beneficial owner of a capital. Beneficial owner of a capital. Okay. So therefore, beneficial owner of what? Capital. Now again, what do you mean by capital? Capital is not defined. It is to be understood as per the company law. As far as India is concerned, both equity and preference shares is covered in terms of capital. Both equity as well as preference shares is covered in terms of capital. Okay. So therefore, Kalpesh, I'll come to the question on withholding separately. While I come to the slides on the withholding, I understand you have a concern on taxability of non-resident shareholders for listed companies. So we'll look at that in the subsequent slides. Okay. So does capital cover equity and preference? The answer is yes, it does cover. Amount treated as equity under thin capitalization, yes, it is also covered. Different terms are used in DTAAs that India has with various countries instead of capital. So therefore, we will have to look at the respective treaties. What is the wording? Whether the wording is capital or the wording is beneficial ownership of rights, or it is, does it contain the beneficial ownership in terms of the voting rights. So you need to look at the respective treaties. You need to look at the respective treaties. Now 10.3, what do you mean by dividend? What do you mean by dividend? Meaning of the term dividend is given in the case of or rather in article 10 sub article 3. So dividend used in this article means income from shares. Income from shares is common. You all know what shares is. Joyce's shares or Joyce's rights. Have you heard about this term, Joyce's shares or Joyce's rights? Anybody in the chat box, please? No? Have you heard about the term non-participating shareholders? Have you heard about the term non-participating shareholders? Chandni says yes. Elisha says yes. Joyson says, Bhavika says also yes. So Joyson shares is nothing but, so you all know what Joyson shares is. It is nothing but shares having voting. Shares do not have voting rights. They have the right in dividends. They have the right and in at the time of exit, but they don't have any voting rights. For example, preference shares. Preference shareholders do not have voting rights. In India, preference shareholders do not have voting rights. So preference shares can be said to be Joyson shares. Or even there are different class of equity shares being issued. Class B equity shares, Class C equity shares, which do not have voting rights. It is just for participation in dividend and at the time of exit. So, or at the time of distribution. So those shares are called as Joyson shares. So simplistically, non-participating shareholders. Non-participating shares are called Joyson shares. Founder shares or other rights not being debt claimed. So again, same thing, promoter shares. Participating in profits as well as income from other corporate rights, which is subjected to the same taxation treatment as income from shares by the laws of the respective state in which the company making the distribution is a resident. So look at the example towards the right. Look at the example towards the right. Mauritius company as Indian company with significant reserves, no dividend was declared. Selective buyback was done. Selective buyback was done. Profit was proposed to be repatriated through buyback. Profit was supposed to be repatriated through buyback. Now, whether this buyback will be considered to be dividend, yes or no, in the chat box. Yes, whether buyback will be dividend. Yes. Bhushan says yes. Trivesh says yes. Sridhar Sutar says yes. Prashant says yes. Yes. So buyback also can be considered to be dividend. Now in India, we have a separate taxability for buyback, that is section 46A, right? We have separate taxation for section which is under section 46A, and also the taxability is under section 115 QA. 115 QA says buyback will be taxable at the rate of 20%, and the company having a buyback will be required to pay buyback distribution tax under section 115 QA. This is about the Indian taxation on buyback. Other countries may have other regulations for taxability of buyback, but as far as India is concerned, we have 115 QA. Moving on to the next slide, few examples of dividend or few mode of transactions, whether buyback is considered to be dividend or no under the treaty, whether interest is considered to be dividend under the treaty or no. So look at few examples on this slide. Interest on CCD, answer is no, because it is interest, it is not dividend. Because it is interest, it is not dividend. Bonus shares to equity shareholders, no, it is not covered in 222B. If you look at 222B, bonus shares to preference shareholders only is considered as the dividend under the income tax, Indian Income Tax Act, because 222B specifically says, now as far as India is concerned, I repeat, 222A to 222E defines the term dividend. So you need to look at these clauses 222A to 222E to conclude whether this falls in the definition of dividend. So bonus shares to preference shares is covered, preference shareholders is covered in 222B. Therefore, it will be considered as deemed dividend. Buyback of shares by Indian company is not covered because, as we just discussed, it is not covered in 222. But we have a separate code 46A read with 115QA, that is, it is taxed separately in the hands of the distributor. Then reduction of capital reduction is covered in 222D. Liquidation of Indian company is also covered in 222C. Therefore, you have to characterize the definition under the domestic law as well. You need to check whether it is taxable in the domestic law at first before going on to the treaty. Agar act mein hi taxable nahi hai, then there is no question of me going back to the treaty. So it is important for me to check the taxability under the act itself. Okay, moving on, look at this case study. Company R is holding 100% equity in company S, right? Company S has given loan to company R. Company S has given loan to company R, and the loan amount is 10 million. And the company S also has accumulated profit of 5 million US dollars. 5 million US dollars. Now I want answers from you whether this will be considered to be dividend. This loan of 5 million, whether it will be considered as dividend. Whether it will be considered as dividend. Yes or no? Yes. To the extent of 5 million is what Chandni says. Any other answers? Deemed dividend. Okay, so 222E will get triggered here, 222E will get triggered here, and to the extent of free reserves, that is 5 million, to the extent of free reserves 5 million, this amount will be taxable in the hands of R, right, in the treaty or in the act also, and also in the treaty, because this is arising in India, this is accrue and arising in India, therefore it will be taxable in India. Okay, clear? Moving on to 10.4. 10.4, a PE situation. Provision of Article 10.1 and 10.2 shall not apply if the following conditions are satisfied. So this is a PE situation, that is, the beneficial owner of dividend is a resident of state R. Beneficial owner of dividend is a resident of state R, that is country of residence. He carries on business in state S through a PE. So assuming a resident of US is doing on business, continuing business in India by virtue of a PE in India, then the holding in respect of which the dividends are paid are effectively connected to such PE in India. Yeah, so what I was saying is, this is very, very important. The third bullet, holding in respect of which the dividends are paid are effectively connected to such PE. So this is critical, that you should have a PE in India. At the same time, the holding in respect of which the dividend are effectively connected to the PE. This is also important criteria. So two things, you should have a PE in India. Second, the investment also should be connected to that PE. Only then it will be considered under Article 7, that is, only then it will be considered as attributable to the PE, and it will be taxable as the PE income in India, and Article 10 will not apply in those cases. Clear? Look at here. Next slide. Extra
No audio, Yomesh sir. No audio.
Okay, so I'm back. Am I audible now? I think there was some connectivity issues. So yes. So coming to extraterritorial taxation situation, and then I will also cover the case studies on 10.4 and 10.5. I'll come to the attribution in the subsequent slide. Before going on to the attribution, let us look at what does the extraterritorial situation say. So Article 10.5 prohibits country S, that is a source country, to tax the dividend distributed by a resident of country R to its shareholders merely because the profit or income has arrived from country S, except where the dividends paid to a shareholder resident of country S, except where the dividend is paid to a shareholder resident in country S, holdings with respect to which the dividend is paid is effectively connected with the PE situated in country S. So therefore, you have to look at 10.4 and 10.5 together. You have to look at 10.4 and 10.5 together. Only the dividend will be taxable in India only if you are paying it to the Indian shareholder, that is resident of India, or if the holding is connected to the PE. Only if the holding is connected to the PE. Now look at the case studies. Bearing in mind 10.4 and 10.5 together, we look at the case study in the subsequent slide. Look at this case study. Belgium company R, Belgium company which is in country R, it derives profit from its subsidiary in India, which is Indian company S, Indian company in country S, assuming country S is India. It pays dividend. To shareholder in Mauritius. Belgium company R pays dividend to shareholder in Mauritius. Now, if you look at this profit, this entire profit or dividend is derived from Indian company, that is country S. Now the question is whether country S, that is India, can impose tax on dividend paid by the Belgium company to its shareholders. In this case, whether the dividend distribution by Belgium to Mauritius, can it be taxed in India by saying that the income from which this dividend is paid has arrived in India? Yes or no? Priyanka Jain says no. Bhupi Vai says no. No, no. Mayur Kalpesh, no. Anybody saying yes? Sid says yes. So majority answers is no. So yes, you all are correct. It will not be taxed in India because it will be taxed only if it is connected to the PE in India. So this will not be taxed in India. Okay, clear? Look at the other case study. A company has an Indian branch. So it has a PE in India. It has a PE in India. Now it is distributing shares. A company has profits from Indian branch and it is distributing shares to the shareholders. And there are three shareholders. One is in USA, one is in Singapore, other one is in India. Whether the dividend distributed to all three shareholders will be taxable in India, XYZ. All three shareholders, only Z. Bhupi says only Z. Vishal says only Z. Rohan says only Z. Only Z, right? Why only Z? Because as we saw, 10.5 says that it will be taxable in India, or it will be taxable only in the hands of the shareholders who are resident in India. Of course, that will be under the domestic tax law. Okay. Now, had this holding, now this holding has nothing to do with, now this investment has nothing to do with the PE. Merely because there is a PE does not mean that it will be taxable in India, right? So here, ACO UK has a branch in India carrying on business operations in India. All the profits are attributable to the Indian branch. Yes, agreed. But still, it will not be taxable. The reason being, such dividend paid to the foreign shareholders will not be taxable unless it is paid to the shareholders who is resident of India. We just saw 10.5. So this is a classic example of that. Another case study. Look at this. This is interesting. Now, there is a shareholder in state R. There is a shareholder in state R which holds in company which is resident of state X, Okay. Now, the company has a PE in state S. State S assumes is say India. In our case, state S is India, which is a PE state. India में कंपनी का PE है. State X वाले कंपनी का इंडिया में PE है. And now the company which is resident of state X is paying dividend to the shareholder of state R. Okay. So whether it will be taxable, whether the dividend distributed by state S, whether it will be taxable in India, just because it has a PE in India? Yes? In the chat box? No, no, no. Anybody saying yes?
Hello, your voice is not audible. Hello, your voice is not audible.
With this case study? Can we move on? So therefore, this will not be taxed in India, right? Even if you have a PE in India, unless this holding is connected to the PE in India, this will not be taxed in India. Now coming to the taxability in India post the amendment and the withholding tax. Now look at the treaties. Look at the treaties. Okay. I have just listed few treaties where the tax rates is given, where the tax rate is given. So tax rates under selected treaties like Cyprus, Germany, China, UAE, Australia. Look at the rates. Most of the rates are 10%, only Australia is 15%. Tax rates under select tax cities where separate rates are prescribed. Look at this table below. You look at this table below. Mauritius 5% if the Mauritius company owns at least 10%. It is a company. Shareholding should be company, and Mauritius company should own at least 10% of the capital of the Indian company. Other than that, the tax rate, the treaty rate is 15%. So Mauritius rate is 5% for company shareholding. Similarly, Netherlands 10%. This rate could reduce to 5% on account of MFN clause. Now we discussed in the last session also, MFN clause is where the tax rate is reduced by virtue of MFN clause. So India, Slovenia was entered after India, Netherlands. So the reduced rate of 5% can be applied to the India-Netherlands treaty. Singapore is 10% if the Singapore company owns at least 25%, else it is 15%. US 15% if the US company owns at least 10% of the voting stock. Now as I discussed that different treaties use different words. Look at this. Mauritius uses capital, Singapore uses shares, US uses 10% of voting stock, Canada uses 10% of voting power. So US, Canada, the tax rate is 15% if you own at least 10% in the Indian company. Alternatively, if you don't own at least 10%, then the tax rate is increased to 25%. So you restrict it to tax rate in India, that is 20%. Tax rate in India is 20%. So therefore, you will not apply 25%, of course, but you can apply 15%, which is lower than 20% if you satisfy the criteria of beneficial ownership, etc. Now again, non-resident shareholder will not be required to file return in India if dividend income is subject to withholding tax in India at the rate not less than the domestic tax rate. So therefore, if you are paying tax at the rate of 20%, you are not required to file return in India and the withholding will be done. But if you are applying treaty, then you have to file the return of income in India. Clear? Now look at this treaty eligibility. You need to be a person in order to be eligible to enter the treaty. You have to be, the shareholder has to be a resident of the state or of the which treaty you are applying. What if the shareholder is a pass-through entity? If it is a pass-through entity, then you need to look at whether pass-through entity is covered in the definition of person. Otherwise, you will not be eligible to claim the treaty benefit. Conditions for accessing the lower rate under the treaty, as we discussed, beneficial ownership is very, very important. Shareholding threshold, that is 10%, 15%, as we just saw in the earlier slides. Anti-abuse norms, as I said, MLI will become important wherever applicable. Principal purpose test, limitation of benefit clause, GAR, all these needs to be looked at before applying the treaty blindly. Miscellaneous requirement as far as India is concerned, PAN, because 206AA will trigger in absence of PAN, or tax residency certificate, and 10F is also very, very important in order to claim the treaty benefit. So substance requirement, as I said, in order to claim the treaty benefit after the MLI also, the substance requirement is very, very important. So this is a list of few instances or few I would say actions which are required in order to prove the substance. These are the factors to be considered. This is an illustrative list, just examples. Location of board of directors. I think you can go through the list. This is just a simple list. Location of board of directors, nature of operations to be carried out in the country of shareholder, number of employees employed by the shareholder, whether the entity has utilized own funds or borrowed funds, decision making, where is the decision making setting, who is the authorized signatory to the banks, etc. All these is important. All these are important factors to understand the taxability, or to understand whether you are beneficial owner or whether there is substance in the country of residence or not. So yes, these are the fact intensive exercises, whether dividends are received in his capacity as agent. If the answer to this is yes, then you are not beneficial owner. Whether the shareholder enjoys the ultimate benefits of the dividend, or he is obliged to give the dividend to its shareholders, then again, if the answer to that is yes, you are not a beneficial shareholder. Whether the shareholder is in a position to make decision regarding utilization of the income, assumption of risk, dominion and control over the dividends by the shareholder, existence of a legal contractual obligation to pass on the dividend to another shareholder. So these are the key factors to understand whether this will be considered, whether the shareholder is considered to be a beneficial owner or not. Now coming to the end, that is withholding. As I said, you can apply treaty rate, but you have to opt for 197 application is the safest bet, because I don't want residential shareholder to get, or rather residential company declaring dividend to get the notices from the TDS authorities for lower withholding. So the TDS rate as far as Indian domestic law is concerned is 20%, but we just saw as per the treaty you can go up to 5%, 10%, 15% as the case may be. So if you apply the treaty rate blindly without obtaining any 197, then you can do that, no doubt, nobody will stop you, but the risk is high in terms of litigation. Second option is you take a study whether the external tax advisor's opinion or chartered accountant's opinion, whether is eligible to claim the treaty benefit. There also you are at risk, because you are relying on a chartered accountant, but the tax authorities may still issue notice to you. Similarly, you seek indemnities from the shareholders for applying treaty rates, that if there is a notice received by the Indian company, whatever is the demand, I will recover that amount from the shareholder situated outside India. You can take indemnity, but even there the risk of litigation is very, very high. So therefore I say that you need to go for the fourth option, that is seek NIN withholding certificate, lower withholding certificate under section 197 to apply treaty rate. This is the safest bet. You have to go for 197. So this is an opportunity for practicing chartered accountants and the consultant to get 197 for the non-resident shareholders. So you being a chartered accountant of the company or you being chartered accountant of resident does not matter. Any of you can go for 197 application. So this is an opportunity for application of 197, a business opportunity as far as consultant is concerned. Now, having understood the taxability of dividend, interest also is more or less on similar lines. So therefore I thought that we will go in detail in dividend, and interest can be understood more easily once we have covered all the aspects of dividend. Okay, so therefore now moving on to the interest. Again, interest is covered under section 915 as far as the Indian Income Tax Act is concerned. As per the provisions of this section, interest income shall be deemed to accrue or arise in India if it is payable. Now the wording here is payable by the government, person who is resident in India, except where debt or money is used for the business outside India, or person who is non-resident except where the money is used for the purpose of business in India. Now the tax rate is provided in section 115A, that is again 20%. with some exclusions, that is for the exclusion is given in 194 LC, 194 LD, where the tax rate is 5%. For ECB, etc., the tax rate is as low as 5% under section 194 LC, 194 LD, as the case may be. That is exclusion to section 115A. Then coming to the treaty, again, if you see the structure, it is more or less the same. 11.1 taxability in this country of resident, 11.2 taxability in the country of source, 11.3 gives you the meaning of interest. There we had 10.3 giving the meaning of dividend. So 11.1, 11.2, 11.3 is similar to 10.1, 2, 3. Also 11.4 is similar to 10.4, that is P situation. 11.5 source of interest, that is which country is considered to be the source country. 11.6 is last related party transaction, that is arm's length price. Now look at this case study. Company R is engaged in business of lending, assuming it is a bank, in residence country, and source country is say India. In this case, source country is say India. R has given loan to S. R has given loan to S. Whether this loan can be, or whether this interest on loan can be considered to be taxable in India. Whether it is taxable in India, yes or no? Interest paid for the purpose of business in India, it is taxable. Okay. Now the question is whether under Article 11, whether it will be taxable under Article 11. I think I am audible now. Okay. So my question is whether it is taxable under Article 11 as interest income, or it will be taxable as business income under Article 7. Because I am in the business, my question is, I don't have a PE in India. I don't have a PE in India. Can I say in absence of PE in India, this will not be taxable in India? So taxable in 11, Article 11 or Article 7? Vishal says Article 11. Others? Chandni says 11. 11. Anybody saying 7? No. Why? Because Article 11 is a specific article. We also saw that dividend is taxable under Article 10. Royalty FTS is taxable under Article 12. So check this. Article 11, since Article 7 says where profits include items of income dealt with separately, then it will be taxed under that article. So therefore Article 11 will be applicable and not Article 7. Clear? Now coming to Article 11.1, this is similar to what we had, but a different wording. If you see, interest arising in a contracting state, that is India, and paid to a resident of other contracting state may be taxed in other states. So for example, interest arising in India paid to a resident of US may be taxed in US, That is what Article 11.1 says, similar to 10.1. 11.2 gives the right to the source country, which is India in our example, and right to taxation is usually subject to limit of 10% or 15% concessional rate subject to the certain conditions. Recipient of interest, resident of country R, and beneficial owner. Here also same concept. He should be the beneficial owner and he should be resident of country R in order to claim the treaty benefit. Clear? 11.3, if you look at the term meaning of the term interest, paragraph 3 says that interest definition is included in 11.3 is an exhaustive definition, and it covers income from money borrowed or debt claim. Very, very simple. Income from money borrowed or debt claim, irrespective of whether it is secured or unsecured, whether or not the carrying right to participate in profit, premium prices attached to the government securities, bonds or debentures. So all these will be considered as interest. It also includes service fee or other charges in respect of any monies borrowed or debt incurred. Definition in Article 11.3 specifically excludes penal interest. So 11.3 excludes penal interest. So interest is nothing more but then it is a remuneration received subject to the repayment. It does not include profit for providing funds. So it is simple that it is, if it is a pure remuneration for loan, for borrowing, then it is considered to be as interest. Profit element will not be covered in interest because that is similar to dividend. Look at the different types of case studies or different types of interests covered. Interest rate swap, IRS, it is not covered because it is a derivative instrument. Interest on CCDs, it is covered. LMN India Limited, 307 ITR 40. Interest on delayed income tax refund, yes, it is covered. Interest received from partner of a partnership firm, received by a partner of a partnership firm, yes, it is covered. Premium received on redemption of debentures also is considered to be dividend, or also is considered to be interest. This is interesting. Premium received on redemption of debentures is also considered as interest. Guarantee fee, no, it is not covered. Commitment charges, no, it is not covered, because both of these are not in relation to borrowing as we just saw above. So therefore it is not considered as interest. 11.4 again similar to 10.4, that if the beneficial owner is resident of state R, he carries on the business in state S through a PE situated therein. The debt claim in respect of which the interest is paid is effectively connected to such PE. So if that company has PE in India and the debt is related to the business activity of that PE, then it will be considered to be related to the PE, and therefore 11.2 and 11.3 shall not apply. Now look at the case study. Look at the case study. B Limited is in USA. It has a PE, Indian company which is a PE in India, ICO. A Limited pays interest to the PE in India. A Limited pays interest to the PE in India, that is ICO. Whether this interest will be taxable in India, yes or no? Quickly in the chat box. Interest paid to ICO. Interest paid to ICO being PE. Since it is related to the PE, whether it will be taxable in India? Yes, yes, yes. Look at this. Interest shall be taxable as business profits in the hands of B Limited in India, as it is effectively connected to the PE. So therefore, it is effectively connected to the PE because it is paid to the PE and it is in relation to the business in India, that is PE. It will be taxable in India. 11.5, this is important. Source. Where do you say that there is a source of interest? Where does the source arise? So interest is deemed to arise in the state S if the following situations are satisfied. 1. The payer of interest is resident of state S. The payer who is paying the interest is resident of state S. Then payer has a PE in such state. Payer has a PE in such state. So either he is resident of S or he has a PE in S. So either the company or the person paying the interest either is resident of India or he has a PE in India, The indebtedness on which interest is paid is incurred in connection with the PE. This is important. The indebtedness is in connection with that PE and the interest is borne by such PE. If these conditions are satisfied, then it will be considered to be a source in India. It will be considered to be sourced in India. Look at this. 11.5. It provides that interest is deemed to arrive in a contracting state. Exception is if the payer of interest has a PE in the contracting state, interest is actually borne by the PE. Look at the case study. It will be easier to understand. You have a lender company which is in USA. Borrower company is in UK. The UK company, which is the borrower company, has a PE in India. Okay. Now the interest is paid by the UK company to the USA company. My question is, which treaty will apply? whether India-UK treaty will apply, India-US treaty will apply, or UK-US treaty will apply. In the chat box quickly. India-US treaty, India-UK treaty, UK-US treaty. Which treaty to apply? Vishal says UK-US, Ujjwal says India-UK, Rashmi says India-US. UK-US, UK-US, UK-US. Now, look at the answer. India-US treaty will be applicable. India-US treaty will be applicable. Why? Because it is deemed to accrue or arise in India since the PE of the borrower company is in India. PE of the borrower company is India in connection with the indebtedness is also incurred in India. So therefore 11.5 will trigger, 11.5 will trigger, and therefore India-US treaty, India-US treaty will come into picture. Clear? So this is the importance of PE. If you have a PE in India and if that interest is borne by the PE in India, then it will be considered to be taxable in the source country. Look at this summary. Look at this snapshot. If PE borrows in its own capacity, now in the same example, if UK company is borrowing in its own capacity, then what happens? Then interest clearly arises in the source country and is taxable. Okay, so PE is borrowing in its own capacity. Now here PE, that is the branch is borrowing in own capacity. Obviously it is arising in India, no question. Second, if HO, that is head office, this UK company borrows specifically for the PE, then the funds are used for business of PE and interest is borne by the PE. So therefore it is taxable in PE state, that is in India. Last but not the least, the last situation is if the HO borrows generally for the worldwide PEs, and subsidiaries, then the indirect interest cost is attributable to the PE and it does arise in the source, and Article 11 will not apply because since it is attributable to the PE, Article 7 will apply and proportionate interest which is relevant to India will be taxable in India. So therefore you have to apply Article 7 read with the Indian rules for attribution of profit, and thereby it will be taxable in India in accordance with the attribution rules, PE attribution. I think with this I conclude on the interest also. No, I have one more slide, that is existence of special relationship, that is similar to what we had in royalty FTS also and also in capital gain, that if there is a special relationship where it is a blood relationship or marriage relationship or holding company or group company, then if the transaction is not arm's length, the excess amount will be taxable as per the local laws and it will not be taxable at the reduced rate as per the tax treaties. So what is important here is the transaction has to be at arm's length. If the transaction is not at arm's length, then the amount will be taxable, the excess amount will be taxable in the hands of the non-resident shareholder or in the non-resident I would say investor, and as per the local laws and the treaty benefit of the lower tax rate will not be available. So this is Article 11.6, which is similar to the other articles also, that is royalty FTS, which we have already discussed. So with that I think I conclude on this. If you have any questions on the chat box, we can take it up, else I will hand it over to Mayur or Ankit as the case may be. Hare says surcharge on TDS to NRIs can go up to 37%. Yes, it can go up to 37%, but as far as individuals HNIs is concerned, it is restricted to 15% by the amendment to the finance bill.
The amendment is only in respect of capital gains, short term as well as long term.
Yeah, correct. So as far as dividend is concerned, that is still continue, and therefore the rate may go up to 28.5%.
In the case of dividend, the surcharge is not restricted to 15%.
Yeah. So therefore, as I said, that yes, the answer is yes. The tax rate may go to 28.5%. Who can apply to 197? Even the shareholders can apply, or even the Indian company can apply. Anybody can apply.
So please discuss on GDR taxability, withholding tax on dividend on GDR.
Okay. So before going on to GDR, we have one query on BG commission. The bank guarantee commission will not be considered here because it is in relation to bank guarantee and it is not interest per se. So as we saw in the earlier slides, it will not be considered as interest income.
So the query is there is a branch in Ethiopia and the HO is situated in India. So Exim Bank has
Okay.
given a loan to the government of Ethiopia, who has given the contract to the branch, and the Indian company acts as a bank guarantor to the Exim Bank, and it pays the BG commission from India since USD shortage is there in Ethiopia. So USD account is maintained in India, and it pays the bank guarantee commission to that to the Exim Bank. So my only query is, since the payment is being made from India towards the bank guarantee by HO for the contract which has been
Correct.
received by its branch from the government of Ethiopia, so would it be taxable in India or not?
So this is basically bank guarantee commission paid from India for the
Yes,
Ethiopian branch to the Ethiopian bank, right?
to the Exim Bank.
To the Exim Bank, yeah, correct. Since it is
Yeah.
for the purpose of business outside India, since it is
Yes.
for the purpose of business outside India, it will not be considered to be as it will not be considered to be taxable in India.
But agreement for the bank guarantee commission has been entered between the Indian entity and the Exim Bank. So
Yeah,
would it
agreed.
still suffice that
Agreed.
since it's for the Ethiopian branch,
Yeah,
therefore it will be not
yeah.
taxable in India?
Yes. So if you can prove that it is for the purpose of business outside India, then it does not accrue or arise in India.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Dividend is received through PAN required to tax treaty benefit. Yes, to have PAN is not required. What is required is TRC. If TRC is there, there is a recent there are amendments to the Indian law that if TRC etc. is available and Form 10F is available, then the treaty benefit may still be available. India-Slovenia treaty was signed prior to Slovenia become part of OECD. Yet an interesting question. There are both the views possible here. There are both the views possible here in terms of in terms of I would say whether Slovenia treaty will be applicable or not, because at the time of entering into the treaty, Slovenia was not a member of OECD. But if you ask me, there is the condition is that the tax rate provided to the member country of OECD. So India Netherlands treaty is a bit difficult. India Netherlands treaty is a bit difficult. But if you look at India France treaty, it is more clearer, and in case of India France, the benefit of the treaty will still be available. India Netherlands is still a 50-50 chance. If you ask me, my personal view, arguably India Netherlands treaty also should be eligible to MFN clause, and therefore it should be eligible to claim the treaty benefit. One query Vishal has, that NR having a bank account in India will amount to PE in India. The bank account is open only for the purpose of receiving income tax. No, this will not have a PE in India. This will not have a PE in India, because merely a bank account, PE has to also conduct a business act. There has to be active business to have a PE in India. So merely having a bank account will not have a PE in India. So coming to the GDR query, I think someone had a query on GDR. So GDR, if you see, there is a specific section as far as the Indian Income Tax Act is concerned, that is 115 AC and 115 ACA, which deals with the taxability of GDR. And the tax rate provided for the GDR is say 10%. So the GDRs will be taxed at the rate of 10%. Any income in relation to GDR will be taxed at 10%. At the considering section 105 AC and ACA.
Sir, but I
The next question, dividend receivable by parent company taxable in India, so PAN required to be taken. Here, if you are withholding tax as per the domestic tax law and you are not applying for the treaty benefit, then if you have a TRC, and I would say no PE declaration as well as the Form 10F, you may not be required to file the return of income. At the same time, even if there is no PAN, you can go ahead with that. However, if you have to apply the treaty rate, in that case the TRC is mandatory, and in that case you are required to file the return also, and therefore you will have to apply for PAN in that case. I think,
Sir, in
Seema, I
order to
hope this
apply,
answered. Yeah.
so in order to apply that specific section for GDR, is PAN mandatory? I have to look out for the PAN of a beneficial holder or whom?
Yeah, for GDR, the view is that you have the PAN. The PAN is required for the beneficial owner.
But here the
Which-
beneficial owner will be the ultimate owner, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or? Mayur, over to you. I think we are done with the questions. Mayur, Ankit. Mayur Jain. Yeah, Mayur, I have unmuted you. Company has a practice of declaring dividend on 31st March, but due to COVID-19, it is not possible. Is there any relief for declaring dividend and paying it for 31st March and pay DDT on it? Mayur, you can unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself, Mayur.
Hello.
Yeah, Mayur.
Yeah, sir, question answers are over.
Just one question. Last question is left. Bhushan Patil has a question that company has a practice of declaring dividend on 31st March, but due to COVID-19, it's not possible. Is there any relief for declaring dividend? It is a question from company law, because declaration of dividend is under the company law. So practically, if you ask me, there is no such relaxation as such. Only if the company has declared the dividend on 31st of March, it can pay the DDT. Otherwise, it will have to declare it subsequently in the later year. I hope that answers your question. Swati has last question. How will we know whether company has paid DDT and so not to include in income of the shareholders? You can check with the company, and practically so just to answer your question, Swati, if the company has declared the dividend in March, that is before 31st on or before 31st of March 2020, your obligation of paying tax does not come into picture, because it is the obligation of the company to pay the tax. So you pay DDT or not. Once the dividend is declared in 31st of March, there is no obligation on the shareholder. I hope that answers the Swati. Yeah, Mayur, over to you.
Yeah,
No,
thank you, sir.
my query is that, my query is that the company has already paid dividend distribution tax, say by 14th of April, and now it is
Yeah.
making the payment to shareholders. Now, when we are filing the return of income for the shareholders, how do we ensure that they have done this?
So that is what I am saying. You as a shareholder, you are talking
Yeah,
from the shareholder's perspective.
correct,
So
correct.
you as a shareholder, you just need to check two things. One, only one thing, whether the dividend is declared in March, that is on or
Correct.
before 31st of March. If the answer
Yeah.
to that is yes, you need not worry about whether the company has paid DDT or not. Let the income tax department do that. Income tax department will
Okay.
break their head with the respective company. There is no obligation on the shareholder, because taxability comes only when the taxability comes in the hands of the shareholder only when dividend is declared on or after the 1st of March.
31st March. Okay.
Mayur.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for again conducting this beautiful webinar today on the topic, which is very crucial for understanding the international law as such. The participants' queries were also resolved beautifully and the PPT was exceptional with the examples and the practical cases. So I thank you, sir, on behalf of the branch and on behalf of the participants for guiding us about the intricacies of the international tax. Thanks a lot, sir. I would like to announce the sessions for tomorrow. We have direct tax third series on the reassessment, and on first we have the fourth series of direct tax about the representation before appellate authority. And on the second, sir, you have lecture, right?
Yeah, second we are on Saturday. Second we are discussing on international tax again, FTC, foreign tax credit.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So all these links are already shared in the group. So I would like the participants to avail the benefit of the webinars conducted by the branch. And thanks a lot, sir. Thanks again. We will meet the participants in the next session. That is tomorrow and day after tomorrow. Who want to join the session?
Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you, sir.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.